Don't tell me we did that. God damn it. Well, welcome back, guys, and as you can see, I'm back on our 456 project. Now, it's actually been several weeks. I think it's actually been nearly a month since we were last working on this 456. I actually had the parts, I think about 2 weeks ago I had all the parts here on hand, but I wasn't able to get back onto this car right away because I was still finishing up the project that I was working on in between this car. And that project was actually pretty fun project. So we had a 430 in here. It was an F1 car. I worked through converting that car to a gated 6-speed. So I installed a Cambio Manuele conversion kit. Ended up putting a whole new clutch in the car. Really worked through that in a lot of detail. So some pretty great content here for the channel. Unfortunately, the work on that car took me a little bit longer than I was anticipating. We ended up doing some extra work that wasn't expected once I got started. I ended up doing a biannual service on the car. I ended up lowering the car, did an exhaust bypass on it. Fortunately for me, this client is very flexible with his time frame and he was very understanding of the situation. I did give him a heads up before I jumped off of this car and started the 430 that there was a good chance that the projects were going to overlap based on when I would have the parts to be ready to get back onto his 456. I came out here today. It's the first day I got started back on it, and I really just was eager to get into the car. Honestly, the stuff that I'm doing today, it's just not that exciting, so I didn't really cover it. But you can see that I have our freshly rebuilt radiator already reinstalled. It's pretty straightforward to get these back in. The oil cooler bolts up to the side of the radiator. There's quite a bit of work you have to do up here on the front for the AC condenser, the power steering cooler, and on the back side with our fan shroud and fans. I put in our vapor box here ahead of time, got all of our lines connected, and I really did that because I was about to tighten up my oil cooler line on the upper side, and I was like, well, hold on, let me pause. I get this box in and not have to wrestle it through that hose. I can get everything connected, then put my oil cooler line on. Everything's pretty much buttoned up. I mean, in terms of the timing belt service, you don't have to have the radiator out. You can see we still have plenty of room to work down there, although it's a little bit tighter. So we're kind of back to where we would have been if we wouldn't have had the radiator out of the car, which was, again, a whole nother separate story, right? I'm going to continue working on to get the air boxes put back in, and you know, it's really the same as disassembly. We have our easy stud that we get up here from the top, and then we have these mounting locations right here and right here, but you can look and see that access from the bottom, well, this one's not too bad, but this one's pretty tight. And it's actually a little bit harder because you have to get 2 washers on and then the nut, and you're fighting gravity. You don't have a lot of access. So it just takes a little bit of time. Long extensions with universal joint sockets makes that a lot easier. Use your patience. You can get everything on there, tighten down, put on. It's not too bad, but it's manageable. So I'm going to get the air boxes put in, and I have the coolant hoses here, the radiator hoses. Those are the last things that I need to do up here in the engine bay. I'll work through filling the car with coolant, get the oil in it. At that point, we're going to be ready to fire this car off, get it running, and we have all of our pre-service stuff we need to come back and do at the end. So we need to make sure that our throttles are balanced, do our emissions test on the car, make sure that everything's just running how it should be, running the same or better than when it came in. I will say, I also have various other loose ends to do to the car. I have to put the airbag control unit back in. I have to put in the right-hand window regulator. I had that rebuilt. I have some service items I still need to take care of. I need to get the gear oil in the rear diff. I need to do a brake flush. So I have a lot of odds and ends that I need to cover. That stuff is just really not that exciting, not that interesting. So I'm going to focus on getting my air boxes in, my coolant hoses on, and just all those miscellaneous things taken care of. And then once I'm about to the point where I'm ready to fire the car off and finish up the last details of this timing belt service and get the car on the road, well, once we're at that point, I'll bring you back. We'll cover all that stuff in a little bit more detail because I just find that a bit more interesting. I'm going to hunker down, make some progress on this 456, and we'll see you guys back here maybe tomorrow or the next day. All right, we're back, and all of our loose ends on this 456 are wrapped up. It's full of coolant, it's full of oil, got our brake flush done, gear oil is taken care of, airbag control units back in, but there's a big asterisk on that. We'll talk about that in a second. Everything is good to go. Air boxes are in, radiator hoses. I mean, it is fully assembled and all ready to actually fire the car off. You can see that I have the SD1 here hooked up. I am in both of our Motronics. I have cleared all the faults out of it. I mean, I had the battery disconnected anyways, but went through and made sure that there's no faults in the car before we go through our first fire up. So that way, if anything does pop up, we know that it is new, not something that's been lingering. And honestly, there is nothing else left to do right now except fire this car off. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of fuel. I do have my fuel jug here with a couple gallons, so hopefully we don't run into any issues. You can see that I have my multimeter here as well. We're kind of diagnosing multiple things at once. This shift solenoid intermittently is not releasing, which prevents movement of the shifter on getting it into reverse or park or actually back down in the drive. One of the customer's complaints, it's done it to me one time, but I didn't have my meter hooked up. So I wasn't able to see if it's an actuation problem with the solenoid or a wiring issue on the control side. I have since had this all hooked up where I'm just measuring the voltage on my solenoid. So anytime I get in the car, I can test it and see if it's working, and that'll help me identify the true cause of this problem. So when I hit the brakes here, you heard it just click over and open, and it's got 12 volts to it. So Murphy's Law, still working just fine. Everything looks good, despite that airbag light that's staring us down. We have the fuel injectors and rails out, so there's no fuel, so it is going to take some time to get some fuel in the engine before it fires off. Yeah, let's see how she goes. So you got to keep in mind, we also have to fill up the fuel filters because I replaced those as well, so that's the reason for the long crank and kind of the stumble on fire up. But it should fire up nice on this attempt. There we go. Smoothed out. Check engine light should shut off. The abnormally long Ferrari check engine light, just kind of like the linger. And we'll go check the front of the car, make sure you don't have any fluid leaks and everything's happy up there. Maybe that check engine light doesn't want to shut off. We'll go check our SD1. Everything looks good so far. Take a peek underneath. Everything looks good and happy. Sounds good. See if we have any faults stored. Don't see anything there. Still have a check engine light though. Fuel light on, suspension light, that's normal. Get our fan cruising. What's up with this? So the car is running great. You guys can hear that the cooling fans are running, and I actually have the climate control turned in the off position. So that's confirming one of the complaints that we actually had on the car where the cooling fans would not activate unless the heater or AC was on. But I'm still showing a check engine light in the cluster and no faults at the SD1. I went through and just did a manual clear, it's still not working. So I'm gonna spend a little bit of time poking around with the SD1. I might have to grab one of my other diagnostic testers and hook up to the car and see what's going on. Currently rebooting the SD1, gonna give that another shot before I jump into the other testers. But you guys can hear this thing is just running butterly smooth. So I don't actually think there's a legitimate problem why the check engine light is on. I think it's either some of the pre-existing errors and I'm just not able to read them out. It's more like a software issue. Maybe it is something actual cause with the check engine light, but I'm gonna set you guys down so I can focus on that. Once I get it figured out, I'll bring you guys back and I'll give you the story of what I ended up finding. All right, so a case of classic Ferrari, pretty much exactly what I thought. As you guys can now see, we do not have a check engine light. So I went and grabbed one of my other scanners. It was just a generic OBD2 scan tool. Since this is a 97, I could plug into there. I had no communication whatsoever with either Motronic, which is not unsurprising. I also do have a Leonardo that I was about to go grab and hook up to the car, but to get the Leonardo to hook up on these older cars that communicate through the ISO lines is a bit cumbersome because of the adapters and cables that I need, and I just didn't really want to go grab it. So I decided to leave the car off with the ignition off for a good 5-10 minutes, came back, started it back up, lo and behold, no check engine light. So it's running good, and that's why it wasn't indicating a fault in our SD1, because there actually wasn't any fault stored, but the check engine light was still on, probably because of the long crank we had as we're trying to get fuel up into the car. As I mentioned, you can hear my cooling fans are running. Car's not overheating, which is great. I've added up some oil, so we got our oil almost all the way up to where it needs to be. I'm gonna wait for my final oil level top off once I'm done driving the car, so that way I know the oil's all the way up to temperature. And I went and I've jumped back into the SD1, and I'm in parameters here, and it's what I'm looking at is my throttle angles. I want to make sure that they are the same bank to bank, so my absolute throttle angle is 0.6, offset 0.6 over here. So I want to make sure that those are equalized. That's basically telling me each bank of the engine is equalized to one another. I also have my mercury columns hooked up, and you can see that we're pretty much dead equal on our vacuum of the banks, so I have them tied into the fuel pressure regulators. So those are just some other checks that I do, and honestly, this car is so well sorted, I don't need to make any adjustments, which is fantastic. I personally know the last person that serviced this car, and pretty good friends with him. So I know he does outstanding work, and when we did our pre-service cam timing checks, they were spot on. And it's nice to see once I got the car up and running that everything else is spot on. He did an absolute fantastic job on the car last time, which makes it a lot easier for me on the tail end servicing it this time. So my plan is just to let it continue to run through some heat cycles. We'll shut it down, check our fluid levels, really give it a good look over. The only thing I have left to put back on the car is our front under tray. I have left that off just in case I had any coolant leaks since we had the radiator out of the car. But I'm just gonna let this run here. I'll keep an eye on the SD1, really just making sure I'm happy with everything I see and there's no faults. We're letting the fuel trims learn in. And yeah, I think we'll have this car out on the road today and get it on that final road test. So I'm gonna focus on finishing up the loose odds and ends here and making sure this is running good. I'll see you guys out here in a minute when we're out on the road with this 456. Don't tell me we did that. Hit a bump, heard a loud clink. I need to check. My biggest fear is an accumulator on the rear suspension. God damn it. Either blew a hose or an accumulator. That sucks. Well, that is not how I wanted to end my week. Not at all. Well, this is why you test drive them. I'm actually incredibly close to my house. Not sure what I'm gonna do. It's bleeding, but it's back in the shop. And as much as this sucks, this is why we take them out on the road test. Why could this have not happened on my first initial road test? It didn't happen. Now that I'm thinking about it, we just put over 200 pounds of fuel in the back of this car, and it was immediately after that I hit a bump. I heard a loud bang. I felt it. I was hoping it wasn't going to cause any issues, and I started to hear the power steering groan, and sure enough, we lost something in the rear. So you can tell with the self-leveling, it runs off of the power steering system. So we've lost all of our power steering fluid. So the self-leveling's come all the way back down in the back of the car. You can see all the smoke back here just leaking out. So fortunately, I was so close to my house. We didn't make it very far at all on that road test. I was able just to fire the car up, basically stay off the freeway, and I took the surface streets to get here. I would just fire the car up, get some speed going, shut the car off, and then coast. So I really had minimal runtime on the car to get it back. I was just still so close to the house, it was really hard to justify waiting on a tow truck and the expense of a tow truck. I knew that I could get it back in a matter of minutes, that I wasn't going to be running the car long enough without any power steering fluid in the system to really cause any damage to the power steering pump. Minimal runtime. So the car's back. I imagine it's making a huge mess underneath me right now. The shop's pretty well full of smoke, but that's just not the way I wanted to end my week, guys. I've been working on this car for quite a while. We had to pause. We jumped back on it. I thought I was going to be able to email the customer tomorrow and say, great news, everything on your car is done except for our airbag warning light and control unit, which is a whole nother story. I was going to talk about that on the test drive. It looks like we're going to have to kind of take a pause. I'm going to have to get the car in the air. I'm really, best case scenario, I'm hoping we ruptured a line. I hope we ruptured a line. I do not want to find a burst open shock. But I need to get the car on the rack. We'll get under there and see what failed. Well, I can tell you that our problem is pretty much on the left side, because if we come over here and look on the right side, it's all clean. Everything looks great. Look at the mess this made. Unreal. And look at that. It just, everything is coated in ATF. Absolutely everything. So close to being done with the car, and this happens. So the left side's clean, there's nothing on it, and I'll get you guys up in here. I'll show you guys the bad news. But you can see right there, we blew out the side of a shock. Not uncommon on these systems. It usually happens when your accumulators fail and the accumulators are no longer able to take the sudden impact or rise in fluid pressure, since it's essentially a hydraulic system. So when you hit a bump with a failed accumulator, there's a huge pressure spike and it just blows out or ruptures the side of the shock. This sucks. So the cure for this would be one shock body or replacement shock, and would do 2 accumulators, and then lots of cleaning. Lots and lots of cleaning. I mean, this one sucks. I've had this happen before, but not when I was almost done with all the work that I was doing to the car on the final road test. I've said it in some of my other videos that sometimes these cars, sometimes they're unraveling sweaters. I've never worked on another brand of car that does stuff like this, but it's just the way it goes. Honestly, it's better that it happened to me now than it did the client. I a million times over rather have put myself through this and have to deal with it, and then return the car to the client and have him have to deal with it. That's kind of like, honestly, one of my biggest worries, that I don't want my clients to be inconvenienced. I'll take the inconvenience any day of the week. It's a lot easier for me to navigate through those situations. But that is not how I wanted to end my week. So, yeah, I'm gonna have to regroup, guys. I don't know where this video is gonna go at this point. Honestly, I was looking to wrap up this test drive and wrap up the video, but I don't want to leave you guys hanging on a cliffhanger, so I'll probably bring you guys back when we go to fix these shocks. Unfortunately, it kind of jams my plans because I don't have a lot of space, and it's not gonna be a quick turnaround. But c'est la vie, that is life, right? That's the situation. I still got plenty of work to do around here. Just have to reshuffle plans. The thing that sucks is I can't run the car unless I can find a way to plug that line. If I can find a way to plug the line, I can at least get the car mobile and I can move it in and out and have my lift again. Then it's not so bad. Then I'm just storing a car. I'm thinking out loud. Anyways, I got plenty to think about. I'm going to call it tonight after I clean up this mess. Yeah, I'll see you guys back here when we have a path forward on this rear suspension. All right, so here we are about 2 weeks post-incident, we'll call it. And I'll tell you guys that I am still, it's fresh. The wound is deep, it's still there. I'm pretty frustrated and bothered by the situation, honestly, both for myself and the client. It's really not ideal, super frustrating and annoying. And I was kind of thinking about it after we filmed last week, because really the root cause of the failure that we had was the accumulators. And well, I'll show you guys in a second, but the accumulators are the problem. And I also mentioned that I've seen this before. The accumulators are they're still kind of pricey, but it's a relatively inexpensive part in comparison to the shock. Now, in this instance, the shock only failed because of the accumulator. So what I'm getting at is I had some time to think about it, and I was like, you know, I kind of think from here on out moving forward, since I've seen this a few times, I'm just going to start quoting those accumulators periodically, probably when I'm doing timing belt services for these customers. And I think that it makes more sense to periodically be replacing those accumulators with new ones, being sure that you have good ones in there that are fresh, so you don't have to go through the frustration of this experience or the expense of replacing a shock. I'm also much more annoyed by this situation because I had myself at the end of the week when we were taking this for our final road test in a situation that I really tried to find myself in. And that's where I underpromised and was able potentially to over-deliver for my client, meaning I had myself in a position where he wasn't expecting the car to be wrapped up that quickly and done that quickly, and it was within grasp. I could taste it, and I was going to be able to send him some communication at the end of the week that we were there, the car is pretty much done, and instead it was bad news. That's frustrating for me because I really was working hard to exceed the expectations that I set, and then it ends up going the other way on me for really no fault of my own. Obviously, I've talked to the client. He handled it pretty well. He's a very understanding client. I'm very appreciative of him. So that really wasn't a big issue, even though it's bad news to deliver. Went through, we got the parts on order, and honestly, the part availability was a real issue. So really not a lot of stuff over here stateside. Really, the shock was the big one. Finding availability on that was quite difficult. So I ended up sourcing all the parts out of the UK, and I will say that the shipping was actually surprisingly fast considering how far they had to travel to get here. So we have all that on hand, and really we're ready to get the car, or at least the suspension repaired, all put back together and get kind of that done and past us. I mentioned earlier in the other videos that we had the issues with the airbag control unit. Working through that, I'm gonna wait, stay reserved until I have the airbag control unit back. It's back in the car, and I know that it's fully rectified. It's definitely worth talking about, but I'm still working through with the rebuilder who is servicing that unit to get that where it needs to be. So I don't have the airbag control unit here today. It's actually sent off and out for repair again. And once it gets back, we'll get it back in the car. That point, once I know that we're good and we're kind of out of the woods, I'll go and elaborate on that situation a little bit further. So really what that means today is I'm going to be able to get the suspension wrapped up, put back together, back in the car, and this behind us. But because we don't have the airbag control unit, we're not going to be able to wrap up the car and get it back to the customer. You'll notice the car is up in the air. I got the wheels off. I actually spent the entire morning pulling the undertrace from the car and going through and just cleaning everything. Truth be told, after this incident happened, I parked the car. I actually had plans to plug the accumulators. I was going to come back out here right after this incident happened, get all the oil cleaned off the car, get the system filled back up with fluid, really so the car is movable and drivable while I was waiting on parts. Well, I had enough projects around the shop where I didn't need the lift, so the car sat there. The parts showed up quickly where that really wasn't much of an issue, and honestly, I was so irritated and annoyed with the situation, I honestly didn't want to even deal with the car. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to have to work on it. So I waited till the last minute, came out here this morning, and we got all of that taken care of. So we're pretty much ready to go. And as for parts, bring you guys over here, is what we've elected to do is we're going to be replacing both accumulators with brand new ones. I think that's kind of a common or an easy no-brainer that we're going to be taking care of those. And we're going to be replacing the one blown out shock with a new shock right here. So I'm going to have to be transferring over our spring and all the upper mounts and also our lower shock mount. all of that hardware will be replaced onto this shock itself. It did come with new locking rings for the spring perch. I will have to go through and set the height of those perches on this new shock to match the old setup. So I'm going to work to get the failed shock removed from the car. I'm going to get all the components swapped over from that shock body to this new shock here, and also work to install our new accumulators. Once I have all the new parts back into the car, come back, we're going to fill it up, get the system bled and functioning, but also we're going to spend a little bit more time with the old parts on the bench discussing the actual root cause of this failure, what the true problem was, what the consequential damage is, and just really go in a little bit more detail about it. So it's time to get to work. So yesterday I was able to finish up the installation of both accumulators and our new shock on the 456. So all of our suspension is pretty much repaired and ready to go, with the exception of bleeding the system. So you can see that I have the car sitting here on the rack, and it's all the way down on the ground. My lift is completely lowered down, and is what I wanted to show you guys because I didn't really talk about it much. As you can see, the rear of the car is sitting very low. There's almost no wheel gap in the wheel well. So the way this entire self-leveling suspension works is basically all of the oil in the shocks is the ATF from the power steering, supplied by the power steering pump. And that's what controls the oil and pressure in the shock for the valving. But also, the more pressure you put in the shocks, the higher it will end up raising the car and lowering the car. So since we have no oil in the system, the shocks are completely collapsed, and the car is all the way down sitting on the shocks itself. Whereas the front of the car, you might be able to see, is sitting pretty normal. So you can't tell, I don't want to crawl under there, but I have plenty of space to get my front lift arms under it, and my rear lift arms are pretty tight. Now, I will say, like when you get a normal shock, especially a gas pressurized shock, which any modern shock should be, they want to expand when they're out of the car and there's no spring on them and they're hard to compress. On these 456 rear shocks, since there's no oil in them when they're shipped, you can just move the rod and piston freely on it. And that just gives you a better idea of how the system operates, where it's using all of the oil and pressure from the power steering system to control basically your valving in the shocks and the ride height of the car. So I'm talking about this now because I have the tank full of oil. We're going to have to bleed it, so it's going to suck down the oil, and I'm going to have to top some more oil off. But once I go and fire the car up, And we're going to start building pressure with our power steering pump. It's going to slowly bring the car up to its desired ride height. Essentially, the self-leveling system is going to be a self-bleeding system, but I will also have a lot of air in the system from the event that happened, and we're also going to have to bleed the power steering as well. On these systems, usually not too much struggle or work to get them bled. You can just run the car, work the power steering side to side, and just kind of let it work the air and bubbles out. You can see that I filled the tank up as full as on the max mark on the dipstick, but I know as soon as I start the car, that's going to drop down real quickly. I want to cover one thing when bleeding power steering. Not a lot of times, but sometimes if you ever have a power steering system that's real stubborn and it cavitates and foams the fluid a lot, you can get into a vicious cycle where it's cavitating, foaming the fluid expands, it's, say, aerating the fluid. And then as the fluid aerates, it kind of gets just worse and worse and worse, and then it actually overflows fluid and ends up making a big mess. If any of you have ever had that happen, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I fought that for years, and I've usually found that a good way to prevent that from happening, say on a normal, just a regular power steering system, is once you fill the car or the system back up with fluid, is to move your rack side to side and kind of use the rack to force fluid through the system to get any air bubbles out, and that minimizes the chances of it aerating that fluid and foaming it up. But I actually had an older tech show me this trick, which it kind of blew me away when I saw it, is once it starts to foam, he just shut the car off. He actually took an adapter plate, set it on top of the reservoir, put a vacuum on the fluid, and it was immediate. It stopped. It pulled all the aeration out of it. It basically bled the system instantly by putting a vacuum on the top of the reservoir. All of the air in that system came to the top, all the fluid went down, and he didn't get in that vicious cycle of fighting the aeration and the foam and the overflowing. So if you guys ever encounter that, that is a great trick to do to get you out of that pinch and prevent a big mess potentially. We have everything set here. I'm going to set you guys down at the rear of the car so that way when I do fire it up, you'll be able to see the suspension come up, so that way just give you a bit of a visualization of what I'm talking about. But we're going to work to get this bled. And once it's done and bled, we're going to go to the bench because I have some interesting things I want to show you on our old shock and accumulators. All right, so we got everything bled, and you guys can see a dramatic difference in the rear ride height. The car is sitting back up where it should be, and it looks a lot better. To bleed the system, once I fired the car up, you saw me move the steering wheel back and forth. I was really focusing on getting my power steering bled, so I didn't have to worry about any aeration there, and just to make sure that the power steering pump had fluid and everything was working good. But then you saw me raising the car on the lift and lowering it back down and just repeating that process. You probably also noticed each time I did that, the back of the car was set a little higher and a little higher each time. That's because I was basically cheating and using my lift to bleed the rear self-leveling suspension. The way that all works is the valve that controls the fluid into the rear shocks has an arm that is attached to the rear sway bar. By me raising the car completely off the ground, I was allowing the rear suspension to fully drop down, which effectively is rotating my rear sway bar, which is effectively opening and closing the valve that controls the hydraulic fluid into the rear shocks. So by me raising the lift up and down, I was basically allowing the fluid to go in and out of the rear shocks, allowing the system basically to cycle the fluid through, and that was allowing any fluid or air or bubbles to get back up to the tank where the bubbles can come back to the atmosphere, where I was filling the system with pure fluid. So it was just kind of working the system back and forth, up and down. I've done it on a 4-post rack also, where I've disconnected that linkage, and you can just actually physically move that lever and the back of the car will go up and down, and you can use that to bleed the system. Far easier with it just sitting here on the lift, raising it up and down, just take a couple minutes and it's all bled out. Now I will say that we will take the car out on a drive and go through the fluid one more time just to be sure everything's topped off. Really, I say as in once the car's on the road, it's a bit more dynamic on the movement of the suspension. So we really want to be sure that we put a good drive on the car, put the suspension through its paces, bring it back and make sure that our fluid level is still good and that it didn't drop any if there was a few more air pockets that were just kind of remaining in the system. So now that we have all the suspension bled, let's come to the bench and talk about the parts that we removed. Now let's start here with the rear shock, and you can see right there is our failure point, and you can really see where it just deformed the shock body quite a bit before it finally split. And I will say that I went back and looked at the pictures of the other cars that I've seen that had this failure, and it's always right here in the same spot. It's always like lined up with where the hydraulic line goes in. And kind of like what I was talking about earlier, where the hydraulic oil is really from the ATF, which controls the shock. You guys saw that I'm now able just to freely move this shaft in and out. So there's zero oil in there. So it's not like a system where it has normal shock oil in there and then the ATF is supplemental. The ATF that's in the system does everything for this shock and controls all the dampening of the valve. And I'll say even the new shock, since it had no oil in it, you can move the shock rod and piston up and down effortlessly. Fortunately, our new shock came with new collars. And that is, I say fortunately, because if you look right here, the shock body's narrower where it gets to these threads. Then up on the top, you can see that the threads end, meaning these collars have to come off the bottom. And with this damage here, we would have had to either cut the shock or, push this back down to get them all the way off. So by having new collars with the new shock, it just saved me the hassle of wrestling with that. So we just leave everything here as it is. Now we have our accumulators, and I think this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So this was the accumulator that was on the right hand side. I've done nothing with it other than removed it and put the new one in. This is our accumulator that was on the left hand side, and this is basically the part that caused this. Now I went to initially cut it apart, so I initially went and cut this piece off right here, which we have right here, and you can see that this has our I think this is the inlet line right here, and then this is the line to the shock. But if you notice, they both just tee in, and there's only one port going into the accumulator. Just something I found a little interesting. I've never dissected one of these all the way. I knew that there is a bladder on the inside, but I figured there would be two chambers, not where they just tee in on one, where your fluid pressure comes in and your shock pressure. But the more you know. It's why you take things apart, so you can understand them better. I cut this accumulator in half. Right here, you can see I cut the body, and we have right where this other fitting is right here. So we just have our basic dome, and we'll flip it over, and this right here is pretty much exactly how I found this accumulator when I opened it. So you can see that this is the bladder that's in there, and this is supposed to be charged, I would presume, with some kind of gas, nitrogen possibly, and it's supposed to have a dome to it, and then all of our ATF is sitting over on this side from the inlet right here. And then when you have those pressure spikes, it's supposed to push and compress on this ball, and that's what's going to allow the system to see those pressure spikes and not overpressure in the shocks and cause a rupture. So you can see when I pulled it apart that my bladder was completely deformed and pushed all the way in and concave. So this system had absolutely zero ability to accommodate that extra pressure or those pressure spikes. I'll tell you that I went and tried to pull this bladder out, and it had a solid vacuum on it. There's really no rupture that I could find on this bladder. There's no degradation that I could find. And I could not pull that bladder back out. It was sealed so tight. So I ended up drilling a hole right there on the back side so I could end up pulling that bladder out. Meaning the failure of the system was the gas leaking out. The rubber membrane did not fail. The seal, obviously the seal failed somewhere, but it was a slow leak where, let's say this was filled with nitrogen, that nitrogen leaked out, it probably got into the ATF and then worked itself to the tank and then out through the atmosphere. And then over time, this fully collapsed to where it's at now, and it renders itself ineffective. So I guess theoretically, now that we know we've taken this apart and we have a straight shot through this line here, we could check and see if this bladder is still good or not. But that only tells us that the bladder is fully facing out. There's really no way to tell if it has adequate pressure on it, because what I found here, because I could not pull that bladder back out, indicated that this failure was a slow progressive failure over time. It wasn't an immediate rupture of this bladder. It started to fail over time and then just got pressed in and stayed in that position. So if this was a immediate failure, this bladder would have a rupture, I would imagine. We're just going off theory here, but it would be able have a rupture that would allow me to just easily pull that bladder back out without the need to drill the hole in the back side. So I'm going to sit you guys down for a second so I can pull this bladder back out, and I'll probably see if I can stick something in there on this one to see what that bladder is doing as well, and be able to give you guys a better visual of how this should look when it's fully functional. All right, so I got the bladder popped out, and you can see what it should look like, except we'll pretend that this has a gas charge on the back side, so it would have quite a bit of pressure there. As I mentioned, without that hole there was no way I was going to get this back out. But now that it's out, and I was messing around here, if we note, we can set this on, and you guys might be able to see, but that bladder is maybe a 1/4 inch below the top of this. It's pretty much right at the same height. So we could take that, and theoretically, if we're testing this right here, you can see we don't have much depth. Granted, I cut that other piece off, but when we go to this other accumulator, it goes all the way in. So that's a pretty easy test for me to tell that right here, this accumulator is completely collapsed. So we actually had both accumulators that were failed. It just happened to be this left rear shock that took the brunt of it. So in short, I'm pretty glad that I cut this accumulator open. It gave me a much better understanding of the failure. Sure, I knew that our bladder had collapsed all the way in and was, the cause of our problem, but I was honestly a little surprised to find that it was still sealed tight to where I actually had to drill the hole in the backside to get it to come back out, which kind of helps inform me a little bit better, because that is a clear indication that this is a slow progressive failure over time and not an immediate rupture of that membrane. I won't know or this one's failure point unless I cut it open and look. It's all indifferent to me, really. It's these things, there's not an easy way to check the health of them. We can check if they failed, as we saw here, by checking the depth of our bladder. There's really no way to check if you have one that, say, has leaked 50% of its gas out and still has the bladder forward a little bit, especially when there's no pressure on the front side of it. It's really hard to gauge if they're good or bad. You can gauge if they're good or bad. You don't know at what point they are good, though, if that makes sense. So I think, considering the expense of the shock, the difficulty in getting the shocks, this is a relatively common problem, meaning shocks are going to get harder to buy because everyone needs them for exactly what we see here. And the accumulators, they fit multiple cars. I think there's some German cars, some BMWs and Mercedes that have them as well. So they're relatively plentiful, much easier to find, a lot cheaper, to where I'm really just going to have to shift my perspective. Anytime I'm doing a time belt service in a 456, I'm going to start recommending those accumulators as part of the service. If I see a 456 that's in the shop and I see old accumulators, or we don't have history of the accumulators, I'm going to talk to the clients about it and recommend it. It's one of those things that we could be proactive on that repair, and it's going to save a lot more money down the road, and the inconvenience of having the car break on the side of the road, leak all the fluid out, and just that whole experience. So unfortunately, it's one of those things where I've seen it a few times. A couple times it's a weird quirk, it's a weird instance, and you start seeing a trend happen, and you just have to really shift your view on things and how you address it, because I don't want to, I'm glad this happened to me, but I don't want to see this happen to other owners of 456s or other clients. So I guess just what I'm saying, taking what we saw here, and I'm just reshifting the way that I view things and prioritize things on these cars, so that way down the road, I'm able to service and maintain them, and hopefully eliminate these kind of problems for the owners in the long run. Okay, so here's the deal. The car is buttoned up and we're pretty much ready for its final road test. We have a few more checks to do post final road test. I'm going to run through and do my emissions test. We're going to have to check all the fluids, rescan it for errors, just make sure everything is good on the car before we give it back to the client. But I'm essentially to the point where I need to do that final road test, with the only caveat of this airbag control unit. I'm actually trying to schedule a phone conversation with the client so we can discuss this airbag control unit, where we're at, and what our options are for a path forward. Once I really know that and get that out of the way, then we'll be back on the road in this car for its final road test. We'll be wrapping up all of the work. And really, I've been kind of holding off on explaining this airbag control unit for two reasons. One, I don't have resolution to it now, so there's really no point in talking about it, because it'd just be a unnecessary cliffhanger, so to speak. It's hard to talk about the issue because I want to see that final resolution. I 99.9999% sure I know what the problem is, but I wanted it resolved, so that's just a little bit easier to talk about it. And honestly, rather than stand here in the shop and talk about it, it seemed like a great topic to talk about while we're out on the road on our final road test. In the meantime, I'm going to talk to the client. We're going to learn more about this airbag control unit, and I'm going to see you guys out on the road in this 456 for its final road test here in a few minutes. Yeah. This car is putting up a fight. It's starting to get very frustrating. Just when I think I have everything wrapped up, we're gonna finish up this video, something happens and I gotta bring you guys back. I will say that stop and deviate for a second. Our airbag light's fixed. I just got that taken care of today. As I've promised like 5 times at this point, we'll talk about that on the test drive, but that hurdle is past us. But here we are at the right rear with the wheel off again. And well, I had the car sitting on the lift. After we did all the suspension repairs, I thought we were golden. I had the airbag ECU sent out to the vendor, and I thought, man, once this ECU comes back, we're gonna be set. I can get this car back to the client. Came back from my trip. The car sat here the entire time. I raised the car up to put the under trays on, and I was greeted by that nice little stain right there on the floor, which was not there before. So, yeah, let me drop you guys in. Let me drop you guys in. Right up there, check it out. You guys can see, if I move this slide around to give you some better, there we go. All of that ATF, really you can just see it gathered up on the threads of the shock body. It's really coming from the top of the shock, from the shaft seals, leaking down onto the spring perch, and then it's actually leaking from the spring perch down to the ground. You can see down here at the bottom, there's no leaks there whatsoever. So, yeah, what happened here is we did the repairs on the left rear shock, put in that new shock. I replaced both accumulators. I filled the system back full of fluid, bled the system, and then I just let the car sit here for, it was about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. And then I came back and I saw that leak. The best that I can figure has happened when the left rear shock failed, the suspension fully collapsed. When that happened, I think that it damaged the seals in this right rear shock, and then that's why it's now leaking up out of the shaft seal and then running and dripping down the body. Very, very frustrating. The wheel is off. I've already talked to the client about this problem. I'm going to be removing the right rear shock. We're going to send it out and get it rebuilt so that way we can get this leak fixed. There's almost nothing I hate more than continuously contacting a client and saying, oh, we need to do this, oh, we need to do this, and just adding repairs to why the car's here. That's really why I'm so thorough on my initial inspection. So that way the goal is that after that initial inspection, the list doesn't grow. We already have it all covered up front and we know what we're getting into. So I really don't like it when stuff like this happens, but it's almost a 30-year-old car. It's well outside of my control. It's a mechanical device. It is what it is. It's hard to say we would have caught this. I will say the only silver lining, which isn't much of a silver lining, when I did our initial inspection on this car, both shocks were slightly leaking out of the top seals. And it is something I noted, and I also did recommend to the client that both rear shocks should be rebuilt. Now, it was a bit of a logistics issue at the time, and from talking to the client, that was one of the only repairs he decided not to do on the car after we went through our initial inspection. So like the silver lining is now that we're getting, a brand new left rear and a rebuilt right rear, that the rear suspension, rear shocks are going to be perfect. And it really means that the rest of this car is in mechanically perfect condition, and the car is in amazing condition cosmetically, although it's a bit dirty from being in here. So I think that's the only benefit, but like again, it just is frustrating because I know he's going to be selling the car, and the last thing I want to have him do is continuously invest money in the car before he's going to sell it. But maybe he'll get a little bit of that back on the back end when he sells the car because, well, the car is going to be in such good condition mechanically and cosmetically that maybe he'll get a little bit better price for the car out there on the market. I'm going to have to take that shock back out. We're going to have to send it to the rebuilder to get rebuilt. It's just frustrating because like if we would have known earlier, I could have done this and the shock could have been getting rebuilt while I was out on vacation and we wouldn't have to have all this lost time. But that is just the situation. We'll work through it. So I just wanted to come back and show you guys that real quick. Is what I'm going to do though is I'm going to pull that shock off. I'm going to get the spring taken off, get it sent out, get it rebuilt. I'm going to get it reinstalled back in the car. I'm not going to film any of that. It is the same what we've already done. And now that we know that we have that airbag ECU in, everything's fixed. We'll get that shock taken care of, and I think that's the last piece of the puzzle for the rear suspension. We've touched everything else at this point. We'll be set, knock on wood. Knock on wood there. We'll be set. The car will be ready to go and ready for a final test drive. So I'm gonna get all that stuff taken care of, and I promise you guys this time, I'm gonna see you back out on the road doing a final road test on this 456. Well, it's official. We've made it further on this test drive than we did on our initial test drive. So it's been quite some time. The shock finally came back. It's all reinstalled. Everything's buttoned up, so we have the right rear shock rebuilt. And I got everything on the car tightened up, buttoned up, and we're out on our final road tests. And so far, everything is going great. Car rides actually quite a bit better now that we have both of those accumulators replaced and the new shock and the rebuilt shock back there. Engine's running good. We have no warning lights. As we can see, the seasons have changed since we did our initial test drive on the car, so it's a windows up, heater on affair today, but we're doing pretty good. And despite this setback on the shock overall, I'd say all the work on this car turned out pretty good. You know, the whole issue with the shock was a bit of a setback, and really the worst part about that was waiting on parts. That really chewed up a lot of time. The replacement shock I had to order from Europe, that had to come over, and unfortunately then I went on vacation, came back and saw the leaking right rear shock, so then we had to pull that and get it rebuilt rather than doing both at the same time. Fortunately, the client is very understanding, very easygoing, so it made what is a difficult situation easy to handle with him. So that is one thing I'm always very appreciative of. When you have a really great client, it makes it a lot easier to navigate difficult situations. Also, there's no airbag light. We finally got it taken care of and sorted, and what a debacle that was. I promised all through this series of videos we're going to talk about it, and now is the time to talk about this airbag light. We're going to rewind all the way back to when I first did our pre-service inspection on the car. The car did come in with an airbag warning light on in the instrument cluster. Our SD1, we had zero communication with the airbag control unit with our SD1. I also tried my Leonardo. Again, zero communication with the airbag control unit with the Leonardo. So I'm like, okay, got two different testers. It's probably a problem on the car side. I ended up going as far as doing a pin out to the airbag control unit, so I made sure that my power wire had 12 volts, or battery voltage I should say. Made sure I had good ground. I did a continuity test in between our communication wire where I hook up my scan tools to the airbag control unit, and everything was checking out good. I had no issues. Oh, my test drive route's closed. Well, they have my road shut off there. I guess we'll just double back. So anyways, as I was saying, my diagnostics on the control unit, I had known facts. I knew that I had vehicle voltage supplying power to the control unit. I knew that I had a good ground, and I knew I had continuity on my communication lines to the control unit. I also went as far as testing my airbag warning light circuit. So we had a warning light that was always on inside the instrument cluster. When I depinned that wire from the control unit, I still had a visible warning light in the instrument cluster. When I grounded that wire, the warning light would turn off, which that tells me that when the airbag control unit is done with its self-test and its bulb check, it then supplies the ground to complete the circuit to turn the airbag warning light off in the instrument cluster. The only other wires that we had going to the airbag control unit were our activation wires for our driver and passenger airbag. I think if I remember correctly, in total there's like 9 or 13 wires going to it. Not a lot there. All those checks and tests told me what I needed to know, that we had a issue within the airbag control unit. So I sought out some rebuilders, and I got a hold of a gentleman that specialized in airbag control unit rebuilding. I sent it off to him, and he said he had it all taken care of in pretty short order, sent it back to me. So once I got that airbag control unit back and installed into the car, I thought we were set. I put it in, I turned the key on, my airbag warning light came on, which it should for the bulb check. I waited several seconds, the light finally turned off, and I was like, sweet, we're fixed, we're in the clear, everything is good. I continued on with other repairs on the car, and I noticed when I had the car in the lift that I had the dome light accidentally left on, and I was like, that's fine, once it's back down in a little bit, I'll turn it off. Long story short, I have the car back on the ground. I actually have my multimeter hooked up because we're checking our shift interlock here, so I'm reading battery voltage for that. I turned the car on to check the shift interlock. I read the voltage. It was like 10.9 volts, so 10.9 volts, so a little bit low. I knew because of the dome light, but I noticed my airbag warning light turned on and stayed on, and I'm like, well, that's not good. We're back to where we started. I know those airbag control units are real susceptible to low voltage, so I figured that was my fault. I induced that issue. The battery got a little too low, So I contacted the rebuilder. We pulled the airbag control unit back out. I sent it back out to him, had it repaired again, sent it back in, put it back in the car. So this is the second time. I put it in the car, and this time I had my stabilized power supply on the car, so I knew I had 13 volts plus going into the airbag control unit. I turned the key on, everything was great. Warning light came on, then turned off. And a while later, I came back to the car, and guess what? Airbag warning light is on permanently, and it no longer turns off during the initial key cycle. So the exact same thing happened again as the first time, except I had a battery charger on it, which for me is a small piece of good news because it gives me a lot of good indication that I did not induce this issue that we have. So I got the rebuilder on the phone. We discussed what it could be, options, and he actually had me go through and disconnect the battery for a period of several days, then reconnect the battery and retry the airbag or the key and see what the airbag warning light does. And the warning light came on and then turned off. And I'm like, well, this is interesting. And I ended up leaving the key on for about a minute. And then after leaving the key on for a minute, then the warning light just turned back on, stayed on the whole time. So we got some good information on that. And I relayed that to the rebuilder. He said send it back to him. He was going to make another repair to it. He knew what it was. So I sent it back a third time. He did his repairs, sent it back to me. Long story short, I put it back in the car, and it ended up doing the exact same thing. Zero change on how it functioned. This it's tricky because I guess I should have started. You cannot buy a brand new airbag control unit from Ferrari. You cannot find any of these airbag control units used. So our only real option for a repair was to repair it. And I know this client's going to be selling this car, and of all things to have wrong with the car to sell it, a airbag warning light and no communication with the control unit is going to make it really difficult to sell the car, not to mention the hit he's going to take on the value of the car. So it's something that we definitely want to have fixed. So after that third repair attempt did not work on the airbag control unit, I got a hold of the rebuilder one more time. And this one actually kind of surprised me, especially as a business owner myself. He pretty much just threw in the towel. He didn't really even engage very much at all because I reported back, hey, got the control unit, put it back in the car, we have the same problem. And he basically just said, I don't know what to do. And didn't carry the conversation any further. And honestly, at that point, I was pretty done with using him. I was pretty frustrated, and not to mention sending this back and forth 3 times, plus the time he has it, transit time and shipping, it burned up a lot of time. Fortunately, he wasn't charging me for the extra attempts at the repair, but I still had the initial expense. But at that point, I was just ready to break ties and move on. And I kind of got to thinking, and I realized that I should probably try to find someone that specializes in Ferrari stuff, not necessarily someone that specializes in airbags, because the world of Ferrari is very different. And in most other manufacturers, you just put a new control unit and move on. They're not used to working through such a difficult problem because there's no point. It's cheaper to buy a new control unit. In our case, we didn't have that option. So I ended up reaching out to somebody who specializes in Ferrari electronics, but not airbag control units. And I just inquired with them and was curious if they are able to attempt a repair at this control unit. I mean, at this point, my expectations were low. And they said, sure, yes, we will. Send it to us. We'll give it a shot. Long story short, control unit, big surprise, had a bad circuit board. They said they were able to get that circuit board, I believe they replaced it with a new one for us that he made. But we got that taken care of, got it put in the car, voila. No warning light, doesn't come back on, and more importantly, I have communication with my SD1 and there's no fault stored. So it's a bit of a story on that, and unfortunately, that ended up occupying, I wanted more than weeks. That ended up occupying a lot of time. Fortunately, we're kind of waiting for the shock repair, but in the end, in between the issue we had with the shock and that issue with the airbag control unit, that caused an additional significant amount of time on the repair where the car was in the shop. If we wouldn't have had those 2 issues, we would have had this service, the front timing cover resealed, our radiator repair, all that stuff done in pretty short order, and the car back to the client months ago. But if any of you have been around the brand long enough and know what it's like working on these cars, this stuff does happen. All those things I encountered, it's not unusual. It's not super common. You don't see it on every car, but it didn't surprise me that it did happen. And if I had just one of those problems with the shock or the airbag control unit, I think that would have been a bit more palatable versus having both at the same time, especially both at the same time at the end of the repairs. But here we are, knocking out the tail end of our test drive, and everything is great so far. Oil pressure is good, our temps are great, coolant temp is good, no warning lights, car is driving great, there's no abnormal noises. I mean, I'm very happy. I can tell you that it's dead quiet on the passenger side because we got that window regulator rebuilt. That window is adjusted to how it needs to be. And this car honestly is very, very well taken care of and sorted out at this point. For a 15,000 mile 456, whoever buys this car is going to be very fortunate. We've gone through, we've addressed all the issues, everything is sorted, maintenance is taken care of, everything's documented for the videos. This car is going to be an absolutely fantastic buy. Well, we're back from our test drive at this 456 and everything went great. The car performed fantastic. And after everything we've been through with this car, that's the kind of test drive I like, which is uneventful. Really nothing very notable to talk about. And I actually had planned on doing the outro for this video during the test drive. I actually did record the outro for this video during the test drive, and I was planning on ending the video off right there. But I had to come back, and there's one more thing that we need to talk about. And you guys probably saw it as soon as we hopped in the car to go take it for a test drive. Murphy's Law got us. The shift interlock failed. Now, I find this incredibly humorous because this car has been here for months. A very long time, unfortunately. The client complained of that when the car came here. I mentioned that. It failed on me one time when I was just trying to move the car in and out of the shop. I wasn't even working on the car yet, and I had it fail. I just manually moved the shift interlock over so I could get the car moved, parked it. I figured it was going to act up again, so I'd be able to figure out later. Nope. The car has been here, I think, for pushing 6 months. Every time I got in the car and turned the key on for any reason, I had left my multimeter in the car and I would check the voltage at the shift interlock to see if I had voltage there. Every single time the shift interlock worked flawlessly. Never could get it to act up again. You saw in the video that the car was fully reassembled. I hopped in it, it didn't work. I had just finished reinstalling everything in the center console because I was like, well, the shift interlock hasn't acted up. I can't get it to do it again, so there's not much more we can do. Put everything back together, and Murphy's Law, got it right there as soon as I put everything back together. Fortunately, I was prepared. I brought tooling with me, or you saw that I had tooling with me in the car, so that way I could pop out the radio, and then I could get to the connector. I hooked up my multimeter to the connector for the shift interlock, and I will say that the shift interlock, as soon as you press the brake pedal and the car is running, it has a pin. It's an electromagnetic solenoid that retracts, that allows you to move the shifter. Is what I needed to know was that pin, or was the solenoid getting voltage or not? That was the main piece of information I wanted to know. So I basically break everything down in the two systems on a car. You have basically the control side and the actuation side. By checking the voltage at the solenoid, there's two scenarios. There's a scenario where I have 0 voltage there at the solenoid, it's not retracting. That's telling me that I likely, or we know we have a problem on the control side, and then we could further test the solenoid to see if it actually actuates or not with the voltage. I measured it and had vehicle voltage at the solenoid, so 12, 13 volts, depending on if the car is not running or not, and my solenoid was not working. So that's telling me that the control side was working flawlessly. Every time I'd push and release the brake pedal, I would have 12 volts, 0 volts, 12 volts, 0 volts. So that eliminates pretty much the majority of the entire system, and we can focus our attention to the electromagnetic solenoid, which I suspected was going to be the problem, but we needed to confirm that. We just weren't going to go in on assumptions here. So I did take the solenoid and I just pushed the plunger just a little bit, and then it popped into position when I was pressing the brake pedal and released. And then after that point, I'd press and release the brake pedal and it worked flawlessly. That gave me everything I needed to know, so I just reassembled everything at that point. And then we took the car out on our test drive, and I did not obviously mention that during the test drive. Jump back, it's actually, I would say about a week or so later. The car's clearly still here, but that's just, we're waiting for a clear sunny day so that way there's no rain. I can get the car back to the client. So that worked in my favor because it's going to let me, or it's let me address the shift interlock issue. And if we jump in the car, you can see that I have everything out up here, and the interlock sits right down there. and I have all the levers down that go onto the shifter for the interlock. So everything's up here on the bench. You can see I have the radio out, our climate control panel, our shift gate, but really these are the two pieces that we really want to talk about. Now this is the lever that works on the shift gate that interfaces with the interlock, and the pin for that interlock basically sits right here on this lever. And it was a little, kind of had some marks and some wear where the two pieces of metal were hitting each other and it wasn't totally smooth. So I took a small file and I basically just went, not to reshape it, but to smooth it back out and give it a nice soft finish. I didn't want any high marks, any burrs or ridges or anything that could potentially cause that plunger to get stuck. So I got all that cleaned up and freshened up and back to a nice, good finish. And that's why I have this out. I will lubricate every contact or pivot point, like where there's that bearing in there, and anything that's moving on this will get lightly lubricated, and we're going to get this reinstalled back in the car. My main focus of attention is our shift interlock solenoid here. Now I will say that I checked, these show that they could be available. I'm not sure if you could still buy these anymore, but they're, I think, upwards of $700-800. There's no way we're buying one. Also, it's not failed. It was only working intermittently. So this is the solenoid in its resting position. When powered on, that plunger comes down, and that's the position. This plunger right here is what interfaces with this lever. It sits on the top of the lever, and that's what blocks all operation of our shifter. This is a simple component. It is just a magnet with some coils and windings. When you energize and put current to those windings, it creates a magnetic field. That plunger drops down. That's all there is to it. There's really no wear items inside here. And if this is working, the way this is going to fail is if you have an open circuit. So if this is working intermittently, that's not an electrical control side in most cases. It's going to be something to do with the physical resistance of this shaft right here. And that's kind of what I was expecting. This car is just so old, and this particular car is so low on miles that this is not actuated and operated frequently enough where things start getting sticky and start slowing down if there's any kind of lubrication in there, or just from the infrequent use, things start to become difficult to operate, versus if this car had 70,000 miles and was driven once a week, this wouldn't be a problem. This is more of a problem of cars that sit. It's kind of what I was expecting. I will note that once I had the solenoid out, I was able to push down really hard and fast all the way in the down position, and I could feel it sticking down there for a brief moment, and then it would pop up on its own. So I knew that inside here there was something causing a little bit more resistance in this movement, and the problem was when you activate the electrical magnet, it did not have enough or a strong enough current or magnetic field to pull this all the way off, because there was extra resistance there from who knows what on the inside. Rather than spend a bunch of money on a solenoid, and since we knew the car was going to be here for a little bit as we wait on the weather, I used some penetrating oil. I soaked the shaft. I let this sit in the upright position so it would drip down in the body. And I can tell you that now this thing moves considerably smoother, freer, and it does not stick at all. Moves quite fantastic. So now that that's taken care of, I'm going to work to get everything reinstalled back into the car. And obviously we're going to continue to check the operation of the shift interlock, but I'm 99.9% sure that that was the problem and we have it rectified. It was a pretty big difference once I got that penetrating oil on it. But since I talked about it early in the video, we caught it on camera when it failed on me. I wanted to bring you guys back and talk about it and just show you what I ended up doing. So we're going to get that taken care of. This marks the official last thing I need to do, so that way I can get this car back to the client. And the way things are looking weather-wise, we're going to be giving it back to him probably next week, which is going to be a good day. Well, here we are at the end of the road. We have the 456 fully reassembled, and it is ready to be returned back to the client, which is going to be great because we're going to get it out of the shop, which is going to make more room for yet another project coming in the shop for us. But as for this car, it provided a lot of great content for us. We really went through, combed through the car and really got it taken care of from tip to toe. There's really nothing more that this car needs, which is pretty fantastic, especially for such a low mileage, very clean example. You know, everything went really smooth up until we did our first test drive, and with the rear shocks and things went a little sideways, but not a big deal. That happens sometimes with older cars. We got everything sorted, but now this car is ready to hit the open road for many more miles to come. Before we head out, I just want to take a second and thank all of you that joined the membership here on the channel. Your support means a lot to me and I greatly appreciate it. As for the rest of you, you know the drill. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video with a buddy, and hit that new hype button. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you here on the next one.